on Ahlebait TV. I'm your host again for tonight, Fahima Mahomed. I'd like to welcome you all watching from around the world and wherever the platforms you are streaming from today. It's an absolute pleasure to be continuously doing these kinds of shows. SCS, Sincere Community Services, is dedicated to bringing voices of new reverts, new Muslims, to speak about various topics and issues and addressing some of the challenges that we need to be aware of. And this is a live call-in show. So if you have any questions, queries, or any sort of comments, we are more than welcome to answer that, myself or the Sheikh that we have tonight, as well as my guest. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest for tonight. We first have our Sheikh Abbas. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, sister.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here tonight. We also have our sister Hidaya Mohammed, all the way from Ghana, streaming live. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Walaikum salam, sister. Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. How are you too, sister?
I'm so happy to have you here tonight. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm so looking forward to our conversation. What we spoke about before, I'm so eager for the audience to hear. You're an absolute inspiration, and I'm really looking forward to it. But before we go on to
Thank you.
I just want to introduce the topic for tonight, which is discussing the responsibilities as well as the definition of mahram and non-mahram. We hear this a lot, and I think that sometimes it could be, misrepresented or lost in translation. So it's a really interesting topic. And it's not just for new Muslims. The show is for people that are from all faith backgrounds, no faith, just wanting to learn about Islam, wanting to understand, or just even for our Muslims existing to reflect, as well as to remember. We're coming up to a few weeks, inshallah, for Shahr Ramadan, and we hope to have, preparing ourselves during the Sha'ban. It doesn't just start during Ramadan. So we address topics in order to bring about much wider information and education from all people, around the world with all their education behind them. First of all, I want to come to you, Sheikh, when it comes to definition and explaining what is mahram and non-mahram. I'd like for you to start off the conversation, please, tonight.
Yes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alayhi tahirin. The definition that we find in terms of the mahram and non-mahram, mahram or non-mahram, they say mahram are those people who are blood related, either from the father side or mother side. And the Quran have been very clear in defining the mahram and non-mahram. It has provided us with a list. In a simple term, the other way to understand the mahram and non-mahram is also, or non-mahram, is also to reflect upon those who you cannot marry. They are considered to be your mahram, and those who you can marry, they are considered to be your non-mahram. Like, for example, father for the daughter, or brother for the sister, or uncle, which is the brother of the father, and the brother of the mother. These are the blood relationships, direct blood relationship. However, the children of uncles, paternal, or from the father side or from the mother side, the children which are considered the first cousins, they are non-mahram, but however, the uncle himself, from the father side or from the mother side, they are mahram, and the cousins are non-mahram. Grandfather, both father and mother side, both grandparents for the daughter is considered as mahram, right? And when we say about mahram and non-mahram, obviously, which you will be investigating and looking into in more detail, there are certain set rules that come about. One of the most basic, obviously, that we all know is the hijab, which is basically the covering. So cousins could be considered as blood relation. The first cousin could be considered as blood relation. However, they don't fit into the category of being considered as a mahram, because you can marry your first cousin. There's no restriction. But in certain social setup, it may be considered as a bit strange. In a social setup, marrying a first cousin could be considered as strange. However, when we look at the historical practices of Muslims and among Muslims today as well, it is legally, from an Islamic point of view, allowed to marry your first cousin. Now, once again, those who you cannot marry, from whether that be a male marrying a female or female marrying a male, those are the list which are considered to be mahram to you. Once again, I repeat, grandparents, father or mother side, brothers and sisters, um, uncles from mother and father sides both, who are blood related, blood sisters and blood brothers, um, and also when the relationship between husband and wife goes on a secondary level, on a different level. For example, the mother-in-law and the father-in-law also becomes mahram for the boy or for the girl, and the grandparents the same. However, the brother-in-law or the sister-in-law does not become mahram. Only just the father-in-law and the mother-in-law becomes mahram.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That's made it very clear and it's very concise, and it's a really good way of starting off the conversation. I do have many more questions for you, inshallah, which we'll be coming on to. But before we do, I am eagerly waiting to hear from you, Sister Hidaya, with your journey into Islam. Firstly, I know you were born Muslim, and a lot of people, feel that if they're born Muslim, they actually take on that role. But you felt that you didn't practice until years later, probably I think later teenage years. You actually visited Iran, and that's when you actually took on your Islamic sort of practice learning, and you went on that journey. Could you tell me a little bit more about that in detail, and especially what you're studying and doing now, as professionally as well, which I find really fascinating and quite admire.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa alajahum. Well, I was born a Muslim, just like how you said, and I was born in a community that was very diverse, and my community was full of different kind of religions, and we had Muslims around us, but the Muslims weren't actually practicing Muslims. And being a teenager, being among this kind of Muslims, and hearing all the differences and the problems we have in the Muslim community, the problems we have between the different sects, and even the problems we have between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. I was very confused, and deep within me, I knew that there's something missing. It wasn't full, and I was searching for the truth. I was trying to search for the truth. But then, I didn't know where to get my answer, I didn't know who to ask for questions, and to get my problem solved, because from the community I grew up, asking lots of questions is considered to be some kind of disrespect or disobedience. So I just kept it all to myself. But then deep within me, I knew I had to do something. I have to search for the truth, because there's something deep within me that is telling me that no, this is not right. So until I got the opportunity to travel to Iran, and I was like, yeah, if I'm going to learn more about my religion, then yeah, that's a very good choice. And Alhamdulillah, my parents were supportive, and they all they agreed for me to go to Iran. My parents were in Shias, so they all agreed, and then I went to Iran. So that's where the journey started. In Iran, I met all kind of people from different kind of countries, from different kind of culture and tradition. And the most of all, I came into a whole different community, like, you know, the Shia community. Everything looked new to me. I was like, what is going on here? Like, you know, for all the things that we've been doing back in my country, was it like, you know, is it complete? Is it wrong? I was really confused. Well, I think I skipped a bit, like, you know, before going to Iran, I was just a Muslim because I grew up being a Muslim. Like my parents would tell me pray, and then I'll pray. They'll tell me do your hijab, and I'll do my hijab. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, because I didn't understand what I was doing. I wasn't really committed into what I was doing. So when I went to Iran, like, you know, gradually I started learning the hijab, and then I came to know about the Masums and the Ahlebait of the Prophet. You know, the journey started gradually. It was a long journey and a very interesting journey. And Alhamdulillah, my teachers were really supportive. Like, you know, it wasn't easy, but Alhamdulillah, I met all kind of different people, and I was also willing to learn. I remember during those days when I would pray, anytime I would pray to Allah that, yeah, you know, Ya Allah, like I'm in a whole different community and in a whole different situation. All I'm seeking for is the truth, and I need you to brighten the way for me, show me the light, and open my heart and my brain to accept what is right and go for it, like do it perfect. And yeah, and stuff like that. And you know, so gradually I was learning, but I wasn't open into starting to practice, like, you know, the different wuzu and stuff like that. Like I understood the wuzu, okay, I understood the wudu, but then it was hard to kind of practice it because I've been doing something different my whole life. Suddenly I'm going to change it. So it was a bit hard, but then I was trying, and I knew in my heart that I wanted to learn the truth. So until like in Rajab, the 13th of Rajab, we went for itikaf, and that was when I opened my heart, and I was like, okay, that's it. I've made my decision, and like, you know, from here now on, I'm a Shia, and yeah, so that was my journey, and that's how I became a Shia. My final decision was on 13th Rajab, and in the Masjid of Jamkaran, and I was with Imam Zaman that time, and Alhamdulillah, so far so good, and I'm really happy for the decision that I have taken and the journey so far. Alhamdulillah, I hope inshallah I'll be able to continue it, and I also wish that I will be able to help other people, other teenagers who are in this kind of dilemma that I have been through, to also be able to, you know, find Ahlul Bayt, find the, like, you know, the light, understand their religion, get to love their religion, and also become practicing Muslims and practicing Shias, inshallah.
Inshallah, subhanallah, that's an amazing story, and I love everything that you said. It's really inspiring because
Thank you so
one thing
much.
stood out for me actually is how we sometimes think that because we're born Muslim, we automatically, you know, take on those sort of practices and the roles. And I've constantly, unfortunately, have come across many existing born Muslims that are just, you know, there through heritage, through generation. Um, you actually have to, as you know, a Muslim, take on that role, take on that faith yourself, not just inherit it from your parents or your grandparents or just your surroundings, being born and that's it. And that's why sometimes I feel the inspiration coming from people like yourself is really amazing, and we need to hear this because we all need to reflect, regardless of where we are born and how we are brought up. You know, when we understand our faith, we realize that this is something which is really personal to us. Our parents may give us the guidance and the support, but like you said, if it's not there, done in the right way, with meaning, with understanding, and if ourselves, we don't take that on ourselves, we are not choosing Islam. We have to choose it. Even if we're born Muslim, we have to choose it. And it has to come to a stage where we take our own research. And again, I love this show because we do not discriminate. We have people from all sects, all backgrounds, and you are sharing your story from one sect to another. But we've had different, sect on the show, which is what I love about Sincere Community Services, which is open to all, and even for people that are just wanting to listen, who are not from any faith background or a different faith background. This is what the platform is for. So inshallah, we will continue, and I will come back to you with that. Sheikh, what an amazing story so far. When it comes back to the mahram, I want to understand when it comes to step families and adoption, and maybe even, certain women, for example, who go above a certain age, do they actually require even a mahram then, or, widows, divorce, whatever it may be? Because nowadays our families are quite complicated. It is allowed in Islam, but it's more and more where we do have a blended families, whether it's second, third wives, mixed sort of like siblings and things like that. And if a person was divorced, do those children that were stepchildren, are they still mahram to their, do they still have the previous parent as mahram or not? There's lots of questions around this which may not be so clear, but we do need to clarify tonight.
Yes. In terms of the the first question which you asked about the divorce, family, and once the divorce have been invoked and the iddah have also been finished, then the wife will become non-mahram to the ex-husband. Yes, she will become non-mahram to the husband, and the children obviously will remain mahram. That's his own daughter, or or for the mother is the son, although they may not be living together as well, for example, because they are separated. But still he will be the father, and still she will be the mother. If the couple gets married, for example, after the divorce, and if the husband have a daughter, then the or if the husband have a daughter, then she will not become um, mahram to the if there be other siblings, for instance, who is
Oh,
from
really?
the second wife. Yeah, yeah, step brothers and step sisters. Or even in adoption, for example, if I adopt a daughter, if I adopt a girl, and I pronounce her to be my daughter, she will not become mahram to me. Or if I adopt a son, and then this son is an adopted son, and he will never be mahram to my wife, right? So once again, that mahram na mahram rule will apply here as well. And also in regards to one of the things that I missed previously introducing is also the grandchildren, the
Yeah.
granddaughters.
Yes.
They are also mahram. They are also mahram for the person. Basically, the blood relationship, like as I have mentioned, direct blood line and blood relationship. Yes. So the stepchildrens, they cannot become mahram uh, at all, unless or until there be a legal relationship being adopted. For example, I adopted a young lad, a boy, and he is my adopted son. If he gets married, for example, to my own daughter, right, then my wife will be mahram of being mother-in-law, but not as being the stepson. You know what I mean? Uh, so if there be another sort of rule come in to play, and then this stepson will become mahram to my wife as a son-in-law, for instance, not as a son, as a stepson. And one more thing is the the foster mothers. If they have fed to the extent where the bones, that's a typical definition of the child, becomes strong, 2 years or more, then this child, this boy, will be mahram to the foster mother, who have breastfed the child. Yeah.
So just to be clear, if two spouses come together from previous marriages with their children. So say, for example, they both each come in with their children. So the stepdad is not a mahram to his new wife's daughter.
The stepdad is not a mahram to the new wife's daughter. Yeah. Just let me just quickly, I had that taken out.
Because it's really like, it makes it really complex when people are having different marriages, and if they are living in one home now, that means that they have to abide by the hijab for their new step parent in the household. Is that
No,
what
I
the
said
rules?
brothers and sisters. Uh,
Okay.
just bear with me, sister. I
No, that's
just
fine. So no, you're right. It's the brothers and sisters that are non-mahram, but the actual parent to the stepchild is, it can be considered. And even if that relationship breaks from the step parent, do they still hold the mahram status as well? Because say if I had a
after
stepdad and
yeah
then now
after
that's also been broken, what would happen then?
after divorcing the the wife, basically, if there be a stepdaughter, right, and he is still in relationship with the mother, right, as a wife, then later on this a divorce was taken place among these two. The stepdaughter will be non-mahram.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if the
Yeah, these
divorce
are
takes place.
Yes, these are really important points, because I don't think we actually go into such detail about these things, and we just live in a particular way. And coming back to you, Hidayah, when it comes to even young Muslim, men and women who are trying to court even before marriage, do you think that we know enough? Not me as someone young, but just generally, do you think we know as a Muslim community the rules when it comes to mahram and non-mahram, especially when there's like online speaking and basically mixing in that way? Do you feel that we need more sort of education as to how to be amongst each other, so that we can be more safe and not actually sin? What's your thoughts on this, and how did you come about learning about mahram and non-mahram as well from your studies?
Well, I think we need more education in this aspect, because mahram and non-mahram is something that is commonly misunderstood, because I think it's a bit complicated. And the youngsters and the teenagers these days do not really understand the concept of mahram and non-mahram. So I think a lot of education needs to be done in that aspect to help the youngsters and the teenagers. And as of like until before traveling to Iran, I didn't know about the mahram and the non-mahram. I considered all my direct cousins as my mahrams, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So until I traveled, I didn't know all this. So it was when I traveled to Iran and then I started studying, that was when I started to understand the concept of mahram and non-mahram. Actually, that was the first time I got to hear that word. It was very new to me. So yeah, that was when I got to know about it, and then I understood the different kinds of mahrams that we have, and the non-mahram, how we should relate to them, and as a woman, how you should talk, and your hijab, the kind of hijab you have to have when you're around a non-mahram. And that was also when I got to understand that hijab is not just the piece of cloth that we wear. It is a very much bigger picture than what we think. So yeah, a lot of work needs to be done in that aspect. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what I
very
think.
true. Even, me talking to a lot of, generally people that come to me with their challenges, especially when they're trying to find a spouse and the way in which they go about it. there is confusion, and there is a lot of things that are happening, unfortunately, which people are really not aware. When it comes to, like you mentioned, even that word mahram, it's looked upon like a very old age, long generational kind of word, which doesn't apply today, when actually it is still part of the rules of today's day and age. And I think that when we have some of the problems that we see even in the West, or even sometimes even in our own communities, is because we're not really applying the mahram and the non-mahram rules when it comes to even speaking, for example, online. Because a lot of us, we might think, oh, we're just having a conversation, we're just talking to each other. But then there is an intention afterwards. And there's also you putting yourself into certain situations, certain circumstances, which may give a different kind of message, even if it's, your right to sort of decline, talk, wanting to go further with somebody. But the fact that you actually taking that step to continuously talk to somebody online, that alone is not necessarily meant to be happening in the first place. And I think a lot of even young women get confused with that, saying, well, I'm just chatting, I'm just trying to get to know somebody, which a lot of the times is fine, but without the intention set, without the boundaries, without the rules, and sometimes even what is being said is not necessarily even in the actual guidelines of Islamic teachings and Islamic faith. That's why we can get ourselves into trouble when we shouldn't be there in the first place. It's very interesting that you say that, because I think that even our, born Muslims are not really practicing this at all, especially amongst the new and the young generation, because it's just free flow
Yes.
conversation. And I'm not saying that you can't get to know people, but the language you use, the intention you even make before you speak to that person, and you continue speaking for weeks and months, there has to be some sort of, intention, whether it's your teacher, for example, and if it's not your teacher, then why are you speaking to them? If it's for work purposes, fair enough. But then if it's not for work purposes, why are you speaking to them? If you're just talking about general chit chat, whether from the opposite gender, then that's what I find a lot of people getting themselves into problems. They even speak to somebody for so long, and all of a sudden, the other person backs off, and without meeting, without anything, they're heartbroken, because without actually saying the intention, without actually putting themselves forward in the correct manner. It doesn't matter who you're speaking to. They can be, from high status, low status. They can be a Syed even. The rules apply to everyone. And I think young women especially need to really understand their faith. They need to understand the boundaries and the rules. And young men need to know it very well, so they don't cross the boundaries as well. Sayed, when it comes
Okay.
to youngsters today, talking and trying to get to know each other, a lot of them might say, well, I'm just trying to get to know each other, and we're just seeing each other. And that's a very common terminology now. When we're just seeing each other, we're trying to get to know each other, but without, with boundaries, with no boundaries. What is the boundaries when you're just talking online? What is the boundaries when you're even trying to find someone? Like, there's so many Muslim matrimonial apps nowadays. We're not actually talking about this. We're not actually saying, like, today, this is what's happening. These are the things that are happening on social media. People are not actually doing what is written in the Quran, which is right and wrong, but actually they're still doing things which can actually be, against the faith. Now, what is it when it's two people are talking online? What are the sort of like things that they should be taken, into consideration, so that they're doing it in a halal way?
Right. A very interesting question, and a very difficult to answer as well, with the present advancement of different types and of social media at play. I mean, I think one of the boundaries, like as sister was mentioning earlier, is within, that conscious, that sort of thing, that we have a police inside. We know what the boundaries are and how far we can really stretch. Naturally, we are guided that this conversation is leading, or the comments that are there is going in the wrong direction. It's not going in the right direction. The other way is to, for example, revisit the chat that has gone between me and, for example, a sister, for instance, right? Then when I start, revisiting that chat, and start reading them, then I come to certain points where I come to realize that, okay, no, I shouldn't have expressed myself this way, for instance, right? This is going beyond beyond the etiquette, beyond the Muslim etiquette. It's entering the realm of kind of like flirting, so to speak. You see what I mean?
Yes.
So we should be very careful of that. You know, I will be chatting in the same fashion if there are other brothers and sisters around. The way I'm speaking to this sister on the chat, is it something that I will speak in front of other brothers and sisters? They are there. You know, if my mom is there, or if my brother is there, if my teacher is there, am I going to be communicating with the sister in the same fashion? Am I going to be asking the same questions that I'm asking? You know, so there are certain things that practically we have to consider, and see, why am I asking these questions? Is it really crossing that boundary or not? um, right? So that's basically, you know, before I start, like as you said, before I started converse, is it really work based? Is it really school based? Is it really, you know, there, you know, a brotherhood or a sisterhood, for example? On that basis, does she really need some sort of help? Maybe I can help her out, for example, right? That I could do something. Okay, if that is not there, that's the way I kind of control myself and I stop, right? And sometimes it's from the sister side that needs to come about. You know, both, you know, are to be considered in this sort of social media, or even if it's not even social, you know, in a gathering or somewhere. Because I think, you know, sisters have a greater sense of perception, greater sense of understanding. Then as soon as they realize that there's something that doesn't seem right, so they have to make it very clear, even if the person is senior to you, like as you were saying, is a Syed or non whatever, you know, a person who's senior, maybe is your teacher, maybe he's your uncle, you know, like far uncle, not like the uncle, you know what I mean? So maybe it's your brother-in-law, you know what I mean? So something, the sisters also need to be on guard, you know, and make things very clear in the very beginning. And both, you know, alhamdulillah, Allah, you know, have placed that sense of understanding, you know, and we know how social media work. We know what flirting means. We know what crossing the boundary means, you know. Then, as you mentioned about marriage and certain matrimonial, you know, chats that take place, that is once again, we have to set limits over there as well. Yeah, that I think maybe I'll stop here. Then probably you can
No,
add a
that's
bit more
absolutely fine. I
practical.
love what you said. No, absolutely. I love what you said. And it really does explain a lot, because I think, you know, we do need to have our own self-awareness. We do need to check ourselves. And the fact that, if, you know, there is a natural way of understanding your own etiquette and your own intention when you are placing yourselves in these kind of situations, just because it's behind the scenes, just because it's a, whether it's in on WhatsApp chat, Messenger, or any sort of online platform, does not mean that those rules do not apply. So that individual still needs to take heed as to why they are putting themselves in those situations. And you're absolutely right. When it comes to women as well, we are now, you know, sitting in platforms, we are speaking, we're feeling empowered, we are doing a lot. So we have no excuse to say that we have no control over who comes and talks to us. And we also have to address that, you know, if you're going to speak to me, what is your reasons? And we shouldn't be afraid to ask them that, and make sure that these intentions are put in place. And if it is for marriage and there's nothing wrong in that, to get to know each other, then at least somebody else should know about it, and to make the other person that you're talking to know about this as well. I mean, this comes all under mahram and non-mahram, because you are most of the times putting yourself in places where you are speaking to people who are, you know, you have absolutely no idea about, especially especially when it's online, and you need to take that extra care. And like I said, whether you're a scholar or not, the same rules apply, but a lot of women also get carried away by the name and the status, and they forget the rules and the boundaries on both sides. So I am quite hard and unfair on both, because at the end of the day, I see the stories, I hear what's happening, and unfortunately, these challenges come about. And especially now in this world that we're living in, with recent, mainstream that news and current events about what's happening, with abuse and misuse of, with women. This is now it's such an important topic of mahram and non-mahram, because it just shows that these rules that have been set over 1400 years ago is for our protection. Okay, and if we don't adhere to it, that means we are not protecting ourselves. It's not because we're backwards, it's not because we don't want to do anything like the Western world, because they actually have the freedom, and with that freedom it's actually causing them problems. And if we have problems in our community, it's not because we have the freedom. In that way, we have protection and boundaries to safeguard us. And that's why we have these rules. And that's what we need to understand. And we need to know what those rules are, so that we can set these boundaries and have higher value when we're speaking to people. And we do not need to be reachable to everyone. We don't need all the likes and shares and followers, because at the end of the day, we should be just there for one when it comes to you finding a partner, when it comes to you even speaking to somebody in business or in a professional way. It needs to only be for those kind of circumstances. Don't put yourself out there, talking to everyone and anyone just to be known, seen, and heard, because at the end of the day, you need to protect yourself. So I'm really happy that we've addressed this, even though that we could go into more depth and detail about mahram and non-mahram, but I need to understand, and especially for the audience, to not look at this as another lecture or another discussion which is only giving you the rules. I want to highlight what's happening in our society today. And that's why we are having some problems, not all of them, but we do have, some problems, which is extreme, because we're not following the rules of mahram and non-mahram. When it comes to you, Sister Hidaya, do you find that giving education about this, like how would you, in your experience, being a young Muslim woman, wanting, new to Islam from the practice that you have now taken on, what would you like to see? Because you had to search, you had to be curious. What about the ones that are maybe just born Muslim? They don't have the curiosity, they think they have all the answers. What more do you think, when you say we need education, how do we need the education? What more do we need to see in our maybe mosques or centers or community around us to make us feel aware that, we are having the support system, or we are getting the knowledge, the real knowledge, or we have someone to, hold us back and say, well, actually, you shouldn't be doing that in the right way. What do you think in your experience that you would like to see? Because we need to talk about people in the forefront that are in the community, in the society, so that we can get these sort of information out to the sheikhs and the leaders and the ulama, and as well as the community leaders, so that we can have this kind of education that's going to really reach us and what we really require.
Thank you for the question. Well, I think one of the, the first step to educating the young women and the teenagers about mahram and non-mahram is, first of all, we need to, fix our approach. If, for instance, you see like, a sister in a situation that you think is not right, your approach is really important. If you are just going to approach them with that judgmental kind of view, then of course you wouldn't get their attention. You really need to calm yourself down. First of all, you are going to approach someone, you should think of yourself. Are you doing it the right way? And do you have sincerity in what you are doing? Because if you do not have sincerity, yani ikhlas, in what you are doing, and you are going to approach someone just because they are doing it publicly and you want to correct them publicly, it wouldn't work. That's not how it works. And I think this is one of the problems that makes educating, my fellow sisters and the teenagers hard, because handling a teenager is a bit hard. So your approach is really important. You have to be careful with how you approach them. You have to be calm. You have to be respectful. You can't just go to them and say things that will hurt them. You're not trying to convince them, like, you're not trying to please them. You're trying to please Allah and at the same time help the Islamic Ummah. But then, your approach is really important. It's one of the first step. It's the first step actually to educating, the teenage youngsters and anyone we see in that situation, being it in the mosque, in the community, anywhere. The approach is really important, and also how we also build ourselves, because one of the ways of educating others is by applying it to yourself, practicing it to yourself with yourself. If you do not practice what you're trying to teach or the message you're trying to send out there, then I'm sorry, I don't think it's going to work. You need to work on yourself and fix your approach. Yeah, that's what I
Very,
think.
very, yeah, no, absolutely correct. I think that's so vital. And I think a lot of us need to know this because we like to correct others in the incorrect manner, which doesn't actually help the individual nor yourself. And both is incorrect in that way. So we do have this conversation come up again and again when we're trying to correct, Muslims, whether it's for the hijab, whether it's for their, akhlaq, whether it's for anything, that if you are going to do it, you need to approach it in a right way. And you got to know your own intentions first. I think what you've said is absolutely so important. Check yourself even first before you're going to try and check somebody else. And if you're going to do it with the right intention, inshallah, it will come out in the right way. And you don't offend anybody, you don't upset anybody. And even if you see them doing something that is not in the guidelines, you actually do it and show them by role modeling the fact that you're going to approach them in the correct way. That is so true. And especially when it comes to our teenagers, they are, running away from the religion, unfortunately. Sheikh, we have this a lot in our community. We might be Muslim by name. We even had a guest last week to say that as many Muslims that come into Islam are just as much that are going away because of the Muslim community. And I am generalizing here because there's some very good, examples, but we are trying to address the problems here so that we can take it away so that we don't have these kinds of issues. What do you think, Sheikh, that we could do more? Because I know, we give lectures, we talk about the rules, we learn the jurisprudence, the fiqh, the understanding. But do you think that I feel, especially what I try to do in my shows, is to highlight what are the real issues? What are the real practical things that are happening and talk about it? And, for example, I wouldn't know where to send somebody if they're like, I want to find out, who this brother or this sister is, and I want to do it in the right way. What do I do? Where's the guideline? Where's the premarital courses? Where is it that's saying it? Either it's for, very limited people. It's not for everyone to see and hear, that is free. It is not for all the community. It's either for them doing it for their own background and community as well. We're so segregated, unfortunately, even within our Muslim communities. So, like, what would you suggest, that we do if we can't find a sheikh, we can't find a mosque, we can't find a leader that's going to give us the guidelines to say, well, if you want to meet somebody in the Islamic way, because a lot of us say we engaged, but when we engage, we're not even, mahram to that person, but we say we engage like as if, and we carry on like we're married. And that happens in a lot of communities now. So why are we not having this, and what should we do that is more?
Thank you very much, sister. I mean, this is very crucial and the most important question that you have addressed, I would say. And I have repeatedly mentioned this, that it is very unfortunate that our communities, do nothing. Perhaps this is one of the first what you might call program of mahram non-mahram being
Yeah.
addressed. I
Yes.
personally have not seen in my 19 years of tabligh that there be a program addressing mahram non-mahram. Okay, so first and foremost is that we need to address this issue, as in workshops we talk about a lot of things, but we don't talk about this, right?
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I myself, when you asked me a question, I said, okay, let me check. I was put on guard, you know what I mean? Because nobody asked me these questions, and there's a
Yeah.
million combination that could happen in terms of
That's
mahram and non-mahram, you know what I mean? What if the if the if the husbands gets married and then they have children of their own, whether they be non-mahram to the previous mother's son or not. I mean, there's so many combinations that happens, right? But at least if we address these issues on a
mm-hmm.
regular basis, at least we should have 3 programs in the whole year by the Hussainia, by the community on this issue. 3 programs to educate them. And alhamdulillah, every year we have at least lot of sisters becoming baligh and a lot of
Yeah.
brothers becoming baligh in the community, or at least have a program based on the demographic, based on the strength of the community. This year, 50 of our children gonna become become 15, age 15. 20 of our sisters are gonna become 10. Okay, let's have a class for 10 and 20, 30 people class. Focus on this workshop. Yes, we do mention mahram and non-mahram in our Sunday schools, but do we really have a program that is geared towards introducing and addressing this issue, particularly
Mhm.
the way we have tonight? No, we don't,
No.
unfortunately. And it is something that is required and needed, and especially the way how things have advanced. I know how things, there's TikTok, there's Twitter, there's, I don't
Yes.
know, okay, I'm not in communication with non-mahram, but I'm just making a little video on the TikTok, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna speak to anyone, but I'm putting myself in front of tens of mahram and non-mahram,
Mhm.
which I'm not supposed to be putting that. You see what I mean, right? So and these videos could be, we could make this in anywhere, in school, when we are with our friends, for example, or when we are sitting with our family members. Obviously there's a different type that I should carry myself. The way I should laugh in front of my father should be very much different the way I laugh in front of my friend at at school. You know what I mean? So obviously these things need to be addressed, and I'm really glad you brought this up. And the centers should, in the first place, address these issues. The other thing, I'll just mention this in the margin, I had mentioned it earlier, is that they come to the Maulana or to the Sheikh at the time when they want to take a divorce, not before that. When the
Yes.
last thing they are supposed to do, that's the time
Yes.
they approach the Sheikh or Maulana. They said, we have decided we want to divorce, right? Obviously, to reach that, as soon as the problem have started, they should have approached, what would be the Islamic way of, is it workable, not workable, and many things. This is the same thing here. If we don't teach our children and expect them that they should be hijabi, expect them that they should be praying on time, expect them to have that Islamic modest akhlaq, I'm sorry. That's expecting too much from them, from our children.
Definitely, definitely. I love everything that you've said, and it reiterates everything that we have been speaking about tonight. I've always said that, especially with my profession, I help people overcome their challenges, and whether it's professionally or personally, and I deal with a lot of relationships as well. And I always say that, of course, it's going to be more difficult. And people say, well, coaches, counselors, they don't work. And I'm like, it doesn't work. It's not that it doesn't work. It's just a little bit harder because you're reaching them at the very end stages of your marriage. When when it's at the beginning, that's when you seek the help. So it's very true what you said, and I think you've even highlighted even something more that I didn't even think about, is the way in which we are putting ourselves out in social media, especially with TikTok that you mentioned, and so many other things that that exposure that we're putting ourselves out there in that way, especially, it is actually quite detrimental to ourselves. And again, we don't really have the rules and the real guidelines for this, or if there is, we're not speaking about it. And a lot of youngsters are really getting carried away, and now it's the norm. And if we're not speaking about it, then it's going to be too late where another generation goes and they're going to be like, well, we've been doing this now for so many years, it's the norm. And it's just going to be more and more where our communities are going to be like, sort of like infiltrated into another society, another way of thinking and believing, was taking us away from our real understanding of our practice of our faith. Um, we have come to 10 minutes of the show. We still have some time. But before we end, I would like to hear from you, Sister Hidaya, first, to give me your thoughts on the overall sort of like conversation, and what is it that you would like to add to it? What more would you like to see? And also some advice from your side, from your experience, because like you said, even being born a Muslim, you didn't feel that you actually knew your religion. You didn't practice it unless you had the curiosity yourself to travel and to find the truth. And alhamdulillah, you found what you were looking for with the answers. But imagine how many young, people are out there born into their religion and they're still searching and thinking that, I'm not really, understanding this. I don't really know this and I don't know where to go. What would be your advice?
Well, thank you so much. I completely agree with what the Sheikh has said, and what he said is really crucial. We need a lot of education on this topic. We need a lot of workshop, a lot of workshop, a lot of education on and everywhere. And I'd like to say something else, like 2 years ago when it was time for us to come home for summer breaks, I and my friend, we were coming for tabligh. So we decided to pick a topic and we couldn't find any topic. So we were like, what do we need in our community? And then when we searched and searched, we came to this same story, hijab and mahram and non-mahram. So we came home, and then when we came, we made our plans. And then we chose 3 cities in Ghana to do a 3-day workshop city. So we went to one city, we did a 3-day workshop for the teenagers, to explain the concept of mahram and non-mahram to both the girls and the boys because they need it. And then after that, at the end of the day, because we wanted to make it memorable for the children and everything, we tried to, we chose the children who were entering 9 years and 10 years, and then we organized a small party for them, and then we gave them some gifts just to encourage them with their hijab and everything. And alhamdulillah, it was effective. It was really effective because after that, the teenagers took and they would ask us questions when they have questions regarding mahram and non-mahram and hijab and everything, because we didn't have a lot of time to go much deeper into the topic, but then we did try our best. So yeah, we need a lot of work to be done in this aspect, a lot of workshop, a lot of education, anything. It doesn't matter if this gets to explain into details to them, it's going to be effective because they would also go on to explain it to someone. And yeah, as when you ask me of advice, right? Well, can we come back to that later?
Absolutely. No, not a problem at all. I think you've said it all
Thank you.
anyway. I think the best advice that, I can take from listening to you is the fact that, we need to choose for ourselves, and the fact that you went on a personal journey of, trying to find the truth, seeking the truth, and, you did. And that's what it's about, because we all come to an age, regardless of, having that parental guidance, support, or role models around us. We come to an age where we think existentially. Why are we here? What is the meaning? What are we doing things? I know a lot of teenagers, they question this, but the reason why they run away is because their parents firstly can't answer them with those questions clearly, and they don't have the role models around them, or if they are seeking the information, it's not the correct one. So that's what I see. And I feel that, you were blessed to be able to go to a city like Iran to find the questions that you were asking and looking for. But today, unfortunately, we don't always have that opportunity. And, a lot of our parents are really not educated. They may be even in the secular education. They might have the holy status professionally. But unfortunately, when it comes to Islam, when it comes to the faith, they've only left it for the Sunday, Saturday school, like the Sheikh said. And that is just the tip of the icing bird, when we need to practice it every day in our household and be that kind of, example every day. Not just leave it to the Islamic schools and then live a different life. And most of it is only cultural as well. It's nothing to do with your religion. That's why we are failing, unfortunately. We may be high numbers as in, the Muslim name, but unfortunately when it comes to us practicing and representing what it is that we actually do believe in, it's only failing because we do not have that actual knowledge for us to even practice in the first place. I've learned, and I'm blessed a lot because I'm sitting here with guests like yourself and the Sheikh to actually learn. And, it makes me curious as well. But at the same time, I cannot take the credit for this topic. And most of the time I do produce the shows and I come up with the topics. But for this particular show, it is Sincere Community Services. It is the Islamic Centre of England that has come up with these topics because they realize and they do recognize what is missing in the community. And they have brought out sort of these kinds of issues that that we can actually address and we can tackle what the people really need. We don't want to give them lectures what is just there, which they can even Google themselves. We want to give them lectures and talks that they can relate to and take home, because that's how I work with individuals. So inshallah, we can have more of that. Sheikh, what would you like to say in order to finish the conversation? Because I think, we've touched on so many different things and we still have time. So I'd love to hear from you before we end the show.
Thank you very much, sister. I just wanted to point out to uh, we sometimes go to the extreme as well in terms
Yes.
of mahram and non-mahram, and we need to address that issue as well. Okay, um, and sometimes we, uh, really, and that's something that, once again, education. That balance needs to be there. Okay, uh, we should first know the principles and
Mm-hmm.
the spirituality that is attached to mahram and non-mahram and hijab. Try to understand that in terms of its essential reality, what spirituality of hijab is, altogether, right? Like, for example, you have a narration that Siddiqa Kubra Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha, she got up and she left even when a blind person came to visit the Prophet. And the Prophet said, he's blind, he can't see you. But she said, I can see him. So she left, okay? Right? And having said that, we also know that she came out in public and, she gave a sermon. And she went to the houses of people to remind them of the vilayat of Ali ibn Abi Talib, right? Same applies for Siddiqa Sughra Zainab Kubra Salamullah alayha, that she would even do hijab in front of the fathers, been known as, so to speak, right? But at the same time, she went in the courtyard of Yazid and gave a sermon, right? So the point is that to know the balance, what is really the balance, while understanding the spirituality of the hijab. So therefore, we sometimes go to the extreme. Like, for example, we start to put a very tight scarf on for a 6-year-old and take them to Sunday school, and we have to make hijab, they should really love hijab. They should really, naturally, they should, if there is na mahram coming at the door, they should really hide themselves, by role modeling, by looking at the mother, by looking at the older sister, that whenever the non mahram comes, she goes and hides herself, right? Instead of forcing them to wear hijab and go outside, for instance, they themselves should love doing hijab. You see what I mean? So it is very important. That training is very important. Household and the atmosphere of the house plays a major role. The mother plays a major role. Sisters plays a major role in promoting, in bringing these values of mahram and non-mahram, right? And at the same time, we are aware of Fatima Zahra Salamun Alaiha, Salman, Abu Zar, the companions, Hazrat Fatima would speak to them. It was
Mm-hmm.
not like, completely closing herself off and giving a very sort of cold sort of response. No, she would communicate, An Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, and Fatima Zahra alayha salam. The hadith Kisa comes from Jabir ibn Abdullah, who was the companion. Who mentioned that? Fatima Zahra mentions Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari. You see what I mean? So they were in conversation with the na mahram, but at the same time they had those boundaries and limits that was there. So that relationship was there of brotherhood and sisterhood, which we need to engage, which we need to flourish, which we need to encourage, to have that brotherhood and sisterhood among our brothers and sisters. I mean, this is the only way that they will come to know each other. This is the only way that they will get married, inshallah, in the future. If we completely restrict that and go to that extreme, then that is also a problem as well. So this is something that we need to focus as well in our centers, in our camps and workshops. That is important as well.
Thank you so much. That is so important. I'm glad you mentioned that because, of course, in Islam, no extreme is actually advised, and it's not there in our sort of cultures and religion as well. So definitely we shouldn't be forced to do whatever it is that we need to do. And we also not saying that just because they're, you know, non-mahram to you, that you cannot have conversation, you cannot have work sort of interaction, as long as it's there set, like you said, with a boundary. And we do have these kinds of, you know, interaction between the different genders, as long as the intention is set in the right way. So that's definitely an important fact, and I'm glad you raised that. I do have so many more questions now that you said that, but unfortunately we have come to the end of the show. But I hope to actually raise this topic again next week, because I want to talk more about the social impact of society. And like I mentioned before, you know, the West and how they do suffer, because, you know, we have so many movements like the Me Too movement. We have people that don't know the boundaries, you know, between men and women. And, you know, nowadays even women are feeling like, even in this day and age, you know, they still are, you know, under the sort of like discrimination, not just for the fact that they are women, but the fact that they're taken advantage of in many ways. So that is something I would like to revisit, inshallah, next week. But for now, I really want to thank you both so much for your time, for your insight, for all the lovely conversation and the topics and all the issues that you've raised. Thank you so much, Sheikh, for your time. And it was an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Assalamu alaikum. And also Sister Hidaya, all the way from Ghana. It's been so wonderful to hear you speak and to learn about your journey. And it's a really amazing and inspirational story as well, from, you know, your perspective and how you have come into Islam, learning and, you know, finding the truth. Tonight has been a wonderful topic, and I hope that it's opened up more conversation in your household, and inshallah it will actually help you practice better, as well as myself and everyone else that is looking to discovering the truth. And we